Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great because it's important for us. And I also love this part of the conference because it shows that we have to work international about getting the solutions to work. It doesn't matter to the world if Norway is #1 in electric car if we don't really change anything, if we don't change the markets, if we don't make new products come forward. And also that's where, just like my two previous speakers have said, we have to work together on this. And I think that could also be one of the main benefits for the Nordic countries being so close together, so fairly similar. Because if we can make regulations work across our borders, then people will look not only to Norway or to Iceland, but they will look to the Nordic countries. And they will figure, well, if we're going to follow suit, are we going to do something completely different from the Nordic countries, or are we going to copy them? Hey, they managed to make things work across borders. We're going to just copy the Nordic countries. At least that's my dream. Because we're putting a lot of effort into this. And I've been to Finland a lot of times. And Anna has been to Norway a lot of times. And we have kind of the same visions, the same ideas, the same challenges that we have to face and that we have to solve. And I think if we can manage to have our regulations online, hey, they're going to look to us. Why is that important? Well, because green jobs in itself means that we're making products that are less polluting, less noisy, use less resources, use less energy. In many ways, that's good for us where we live because it makes our local environment better. But if we can make sure that that's also leading the way for the global industries, then we're changing the world. And that would mean that Norwegian companies, Finnish companies, or Nordic companies will be the ones in the front with the new ideas, with the new production facilities, with the new technologies. It doesn't mean that all the jobs have to come here. I think when we succeed with this, it's going to be a global thing. But we know that as soon as you start talking about some of these new green ideas, people are more looking into, oh, we're going to lose the jobs that we already have, instead of looking at the potential of new jobs that will come. And I think if we can be in the lead, we can help the transition, create new jobs, making our country's populations more happy, but we can also show to other countries that making this change is going to be for the better, not for the worse. Looking at what we've done to the electric car, it's one example. This has not been a success that kind of came just after the last change of government in Norway in 2013. This has been something in development with all the parties participating, different governments over time. Many of the proposals started in the 1990s when the electric car was something for the very special interested. It was not something you bought because it was going to be your #1 car, because it was going to meet all your needs, but more for the enthusiast who wanted to drive the change. When you look at when the different tax incentives came, that you didn't have to pay for the toll roads, you didn't have to pay for parking, you didn't have to pay for the ferries, they spanned 10, 15 years. And to start with, most of them were not enough to make people want to buy the electric cars at the time. And we had people, entrepreneurs, pioneers who wanted to develop these industries from Norway with the buddy and the think, great ideas, but the cars were not good enough for enough people to buy them, despite all the incentives, despite you don't paying anything in taxes. They were still too expensive, too limited compared with a regular car. So government incentives doesn't fix this alone. Neither does the industry. Because if the product out of the factory is too expensive, then you still face this limited number of people who have money to buy it. But I think what we kind of seen in Norway is a little bit fortune, a little bit good luck, a little bit long-term planning. The stars kind of aligned, and suddenly you have a success. Suddenly you have companies like Tesla, like Mitsubishi, Peugeot, Citroën, who came with the triplets. Suddenly you had a car that fulfilled most of your needs. It was a decent #2 car. A car that you probably drove most of the time, but not the only car you could own if you wanted to have the range to go on the weekend trips and stuff like that. But having these products come into the market kind of changed the perception of what is an electric car. I tried a Buddy, this small plastic-made Norwegian car. They had a display of them at the local gas station, and I tried to sit in it. I figured it would be good for my image as a politician. However, I found out it would not be good for my neck. Because after sitting like this for about 2 minutes, I figure, well, no, I'm not going to do this. You fast forward 2 years, and you could buy, spending exactly the same amount of money, you could buy a 4-seater mass-produced car from a well-known brand. Of course, that changed the market. Suddenly, people wanted to buy them. And then you had the Tesla come along, which suddenly was a premium brand. That was kind of a prestige to own it. You were not different in a bad way. You were different in a cool way. You didn't have to sacrifice to have a good car. And now we see the success. When all the big car manufacturers are saying, hey, the electric car is going to be a part of our portfolio. When even Toyota says electric car is going to be part of our portfolio, it shows that the battery electric is gaining ground. Not to put down the hydrogen. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen also with that. But when you see what has the market penetration today, there's no doubt in my mind that the battery electric is changing the way we travel. It's changing the perception. But you need to have both the government and the industry to play along with this. When I've been traveling abroad for some of the visits, we talk to politicians in other countries. And we ask them, what's your policy when it comes to charging stations? And the answer we get some places, well, we are going to invest in those when more people have bought the electric car. Because so far, there's too few users. And in my view, that's the complete opposite. If you don't give them the range, they're not going to buy the electric car. You need to make sure that that's the car they can use every day. And that's how you change the market, by making it more advantageous to have the electric car compared with the gasoline car. And that's where our policies are going to continue. Make sure that owning the green car is going to be more beneficial to your wallet than owning the fossil fuel car. And I think doing this is going to create jobs. Well, it hasn't created a lot of jobs in Norway yet, but it has helped to move an industry that's creating green jobs other places. We do want to benefit on this in Norway as well, because we have proven that it's a system that works, that people will actually want to buy the electric car when they see it can meet your everyday needs. It means that having all the charging stations, having the benefits, has changed the way people perceive the electric car. Because when you ask the general guy today, he will consider an electric car just the way he will consider a gasoline car. You don't see that happen in a lot of markets, but it's happening in Norway. And what's even more fun, I think, is that most electric car owners, when you ask them, what's your next car going to be? They say it's still going to be an electric car. Then you have transformed the economy. We have to make sure that Norway is still leading the charge in many ways. We are now working on the legislation to make sure that autonomous vehicles can be tested out on the roads. We are working on making sure that we can test out autonomous ships in Norway, having designated areas in the fjords. We are testing out autonomous snow removal vehicles at airports. We are going to have 15-hour airports but remotely controlled, using technology from a Norwegian company called Kongsberg. Doing this, of course, is kind of disruptive the way we've been doing things. It's not going to happen without quarrels or people fearing that their jobs are going to be lost. We have to show that this is going to create more jobs than the ones you lose, but it's going to be different kind of jobs. Because we're not going to meet today's demand in all eternity. Having lower cost on the services you provide is probably going to increase the demand for those kind of services. So even though you have fewer people working to provide a certain amount of goods, demanding more airline travel, more bus transportation, more ship transportation, means that there will be more people working on this all together. And that's where the electric vehicle, one of the main issues we have to deal with that, electric vehicle and autonomy, has to be that we're not going to end up with everybody owning an autonomous vehicle parked in their own garage for personal use only. We have to make sure that the electric vehicle and the digitalization and autonomy makes our mass transit system more accessible, more pleasant to ride, more personal, because that is going to help us have less cars on the road, more miles traveled, less pollution, less noise, and also make sure that more people work in our mass transit system, because it's going to meet our everyday demand about mobility. And this, when it comes to the electric car, when it comes down to it, if we cannot provide mobility in a predictable way, people are not going to care how green it is, because they need to have their work or their life work and managed. But I think we're going to solve this. And that's where the Nordic cooperation and, for instance, the MAS company in Finland is really important to exactly do that. Thank you for your attention.